The most recent version of the president's travel ban was halted before it was enacted by a judge in Hawaii this week. The president responded that he intends to fight the decision even to the Supreme Court. Speaking of the Supreme Court, Colorado Judge Neil Gorsuch begins his confirmation hearings next week. Patty, as you look at it right now, does Neil Gorsuch have much to worry about in his confirmation hearings?
Well, he will definitely come out a little bruised because no matter what, Democrats who are still smarting over Merrick Garland and how he never got his hearing at this, with the Senate are going to be throwing us some delaying tactics. But really, besides the fact that you kind of want to champion a hometown hero, he did clerk for Whizzer White. I mean, he is a jurist that people are really people really admire him, even if they don't necessarily agree with all of his politics. I think he's the best we can possibly anticipate Trump having nominated. You don't even want to think about who the next 3 or 4 judges he might be able to nominate are. It's interesting to have the travel ban just held in abeyance again right now on St. Patrick's Day. Let's remember that there was a time when refugees were welcomed, although the Irish also took their hits when they first came to this country. So given St. Patrick's Day, given how important the Irish have become in this country, let's remember all the other groups that have come in and flavored this great melting pot.
Here, as a, let's see, great-grandson of Italian immigrants, I can definitely echo your sentiments there. Craig, as you look at the travel ban again being stopped by a state, I guess it was a federal judge in Hawaii, does it need to go to the Supreme Court to be overturned? Is that really the only option that President Trump has at this point if he wants to see it enacted?
Well, it was Judge Watson in Hawaii, Judge Chung in Maryland. 2 federal judges have stopped it. The Ninth Circuit will probably back the Hawaii judge. I'm not sure what will happen in Maryland, but ultimately I expect this will go to the Supreme Court. Will Neil Gorsuch be a part of that court? I bet he will be. But this kind of puts him on the hot seat. Donald Trump was a little more restrained in Nashville as he discussed the latest ruling against him. We'll recall that when he was ruled against in Washington, he called the federal district court judge a so-called judge. And Judge Gorsuch apparently told Senator Blumenthal that he found that disheartening and demoralizing. So expect him to be asked about it. But on the travel ban itself, this bothers me as a lawyer because Donald Trump, his original sin, December 7, 2015, right after the San Bernardino massacre, he talked about a total Muslim travel ban. And these courts keep going back to that. And when is he going to get past it? If he puts troops in Syria to fight the Islamic State, is that unconstitutional because Islam's a part of it? Can we talk about the Quran, the Hadith, Sharia law, or is that against the First Amendment? We need some guidance from the Supreme Court. And since when do foreigners have American constitutional rights? I never heard of this before, and I don't think the Supreme Court will follow the path of the Hawaii judge or the Maryland federal judge.
But there's a lot of legal issues in there. It's not just the First Amendment or constitutional rights for foreigners. I mean, there's a lot of different angles to this. Wouldn't you agree?
Right. But for you to equate your ancestors or Irish ancestors or my ancestors with the current situation, let's face it, Donald Trump told Anderson Cooper that he thinks Islam may be at war with us. And there are aspects of Sharia law that are different than the cultures that we brought here. And will they assimilate? Well, a lot of American Muslims have. But if we get inundated the way Germany and parts of Europe have, are they really assimilating, or are there no-go areas in major European cities right now? I think there are, and we want to avoid that. And Donald Trump ran on that, and the people elected him. So for a federal judge to say, we're going to go a different way, it seems kind of anti-democratic.
It seems odd to be debating assimilation when we're celebrating an Irish holiday in America. We have an influx of immigrants over 120 years ago that were all from an island that weren't necessarily welcomed because of their influx, but now we are celebrating one of their holidays. So we could probably go another hour for this. Let me, Natasha, as you see Democrats in D.C. right now, there are a lot of things to argue when it comes to President Trump's policies. They have a brand new budget to argue over. They have a potential Supreme Court justice confirmation hearings with Neil Gorsuch, the travel ban. There's a lot of things to do. Do you think Democrats are going to spend much of their political capital fighting the Gorsuch confirmation when there's a lot of other targets for their aim?
I think that they have to, simply because of the precedent that has been set in recent years, that if they just let this go, then when the next appointee comes up, what ground do they have to stand on? That would be surprising to me if the Democrats didn't put up a little bit of a fuss. I don't think it'll be a long, extended battle, though. There's a lot of talk about how this is like for like, how he sort of replaces a Scalia. Now, I think that comparison is maybe a little too easy to make, a little too broad, but there's precedent for that. What I do think is interesting, though, with this relation to the travel ban, is that there is this legal question and the sort of the intentionality of which the Hawaiian judge was really looking at. Well, you said something during the campaign, now you're doing this, you changed the word slightly, but we have to look at the context of all of that. That's interesting, but then if you look in Colorado, to bring it back to Joe Salazar, the conversation we're having at the state capitol this week is how would Colorado react to this? So looking at a bill that would remove us from internment camp or any sort of registries that came through. And that's a conversation that's happened here locally. I think that'll happen in D.C. as well, that this is not just a battle for the courts, but this question of how do we treat immigrants? How does this country respond to people who are refugees and seeking a better life in America? And that conversation is going to be very interesting over the next 4 or 5 years.
Mary, do you foresee a bumpy ride for Neil Gorsuch in the next couple of weeks?
No, it's political theater at this point, and we'll see how that plays out in terms of the process. But it's partisan politics at its best. As for the travel ban, that's something that I'm a lot more interested in. I work for a number of international outlets, so there's constant coverage of that. What we can look for in the coming weeks is how the travel ban is affecting the economy. Travel trackers, industry experts are looking at that. According to Yahoo Finance, the number of people coming in from the 7 countries initially affected, now 6, obviously Iraq has been pulled off the list, has fallen between 4% and 5%. We're talking, millions of dollars. So how this is going to play out in terms of real numbers of people coming to the country. On a personal note, as I told you when we started the show today, my parents are immigrants from Ireland to Denver. They came in the 1970s. So I take St. Patrick's Day very seriously, even if we celebrate it differently than most people do, which as a child involved, drinking tea and going to mass, and that was about it. But the day after Trump's election, November 9th, my mother watched CNN with soon-to-be President Trump and then President Barack Obama, and she called me up in tears and said, as an immigrant, this is frightening. And she's not someone who is politically or particularly anti-Trump, we'll say, in any way. She's someone who became an American citizen about 10 years ago, along with my father, and is very proud to be an American, very proud to have raised her family here. But they hold very dear to this notion that America is a country of immigrants from everywhere, and that these discussions are absolutely pertinent to be having. And on a final note, I interviewed for ColoradoPolitics.com. You can look it up today. The official Irish representative in Denver. There's an Irish honorary consul here, James Lyons, and he really echoed that tone, saying that he says in no uncertain terms that immigrants are the past, present, and future of our country.